Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance, and this resistance video is sponsored by contribution from Anonymous, and here's her story. Hi, Ollie. I went no contact with my narcissistic mother and golden child younger sister 1 year ago. I stayed up all night on Mother's Day to write this letter because it reminded me that I went no contact 1 year ago today. To say that it has been a healing process is an understatement. As you know from all the letters you receive, some days I am better than others. Your channel and hearing people's stories have been very helpful. You are very insightful, and your comments and humor really help all of us. Growing up, I thought I was the only one with parents who behaved like this. It is helpful to hear there are others who are trying to heal from this horrible abuse. When I found out that my father was dying from complications related to diabetes, I knew that I was going to be in for a rough ride with my highly narcissistic parents. But I could never imagine the series of tragic, sometimes comical events that sparked as a result of his illness, death, and funeral. When my father started dialysis due to complications from diabetes, my mother became even harder to deal with in terms of her attempts to manipulate me with guilt. Over the course of 2 years, my dad had several amputations done on his feet and legs. In the end, he had both legs amputated before he succumbed. Over 22 years ago, I moved with my husband and kids to the West Coast. I was so excited to move far away from my parents in the Midwest. During that time, we had very limited contact with them. In fact, there were times that several years would go by without seeing them in person. It was just phone calls and some emails. When my dad started dialysis, we made a few trips back. During one of those short visits, we were there to celebrate my mom and dad's 50th wedding anniversary. I almost canceled that trip due to the fact that my mother became unglued on the phone. She was screaming at me in a very loud, angry way over something about my dad's foot. Over the years, she had many meltdowns, but this was bad. I chose to remain calm and not hang up. I changed the subject. The next day when she called, she didn't apologize. I knew my father set her up to call me. He too is a horrible narcissist, yet he was able to control himself to maintain a relationship, not as overtly emotional as my mother. She loves to scream and cry, the kind of crying where you see no tears. Right, borderline tears that don't exist. It's the non-existent tears of the borderline's histrionics, where the carrying on's there, the behavior's there, but the tears aren't there. She would pretend to cry all the time for simple things such as loading a suitcase in the car. During a phone call, I told her in a very calm voice, "Mom, your behavior is not appropriate, especially for a woman of your age. You can't scream at people like that." It was then that my mom said, "Well, I never." They never. Yeah, the narcissist does never. Yeah, the narcissist really does never. Well, I never. No shit. You never loved me. You never appreciated me. You never treated me like a daughter. You never treated me with love, with respect, with kindness. Yeah, you goddamn right you never. When the narcissist says, "Well, I never," well, they mean it. My mother can handle screaming and getting people upset, but being calm and treating her like an adult is something she can't handle. I flew back east for my parents' wedding anniversary. When we got there, my husband and I were to meet my parents and sister at a professional photography studio. My mother wanted us to show up in dress clothes for a family portrait. When we got to the studio, my mother then revealed that my husband wasn't going to be in the family portrait. She said she wanted only her family in the picture. She never mentioned this before we arrived. I didn't want my husband over 30 years left out of the picture. My husband said that's fine, not a problem for him. I was quite upset that she pulled this at the last minute, and she insisted that I pay for the photos. Needless to say, I never hung those pictures in my home since I was upset with the crap my mother pulled. I am guessing she wanted to hurt me with her antics that day, right? And you should have just walked out. Okay? When the narcissist suddenly changes plans, is the only response is just to turn around and walk out. So that's not what we agreed to, and leave. Just like you don't want to raise your voice, you should have just turned around and walked out. And that would have ended her power play. You would have gotten another, well, I never again. To which the answer is, of course you never. No shit, you never. Later that day, at a restaurant table in front of our family and friends, my mother chose to give me her original wedding ring set, which she had replaced with a bigger diamond ring many years ago. As she handed me the ring, she said very nasty things about me in front of all these people. It was done in a way that my relatives would not understand how nasty she was being. I have heard people call this tactic a narc dog whistle because only I understood she intended to slam me with insults. She had a horrific look on her face as she was saying all these things about me. It's hard to describe. It was truly a demonic look. She had so much seething hate and anger towards me as she spoke in front of everyone. It was her way of getting revenge for me, calling her out on her poor behavior on the phone previously. As a child, I remember going to the hospital to visit my mother. I bought her a stick pen with my own money I earned. My dad was there too. He told my mother how much I paid for the pen. He told her that I also bought myself an album. He said I could have bought her a better gift if I hadn't bought myself a record. They both screamed at me, told me how selfish I was to not spend it all on her gift. There I was, this little girl standing there crying. It was then that I learned that my gifts were never good enough in their eyes, and I learned that very early on as a child too. That's why I never stopped. I stopped trying to give my parents gifts, because there was nothing. You were never going to win. So why give them anything? They're going to shit on it regardless, so why give them anything? After my trip to see my parents' wedding anniversary, I didn't go back again until a few months before my dad died. During that trip, my dad wanted me to read his obituary. Yes, my narcissist dad wrote his own obituary. My dad, mother, and golden child sister then proceeded to berate me because I didn't break down in tears as I read it. I would get berated too if I didn't cry over things. Because the thought of me dying and you don't even get upset. Why would I? I wanted you dead. My mother used to say this shit. If I died, you wouldn't even cry. And I would say, nope. Yeah, I wouldn't. What's to cry over? What's to cry over? Right there and then it should have told you. Okay, the reason why you're not crying over the dead narcissist is because there's nothing to cry over. You haven't earned my tears. You haven't earned my sorrow. You haven't earned my mourning or my grief, especially when you're still alive and you wrote this yourself, motherfucker. Fuck out of here. Fuck out of here. It's your bullshit. I'll wipe my ass with this thing. How about I write my own after you're dead? My dad, mother, and golden child... Oh, hold on. They kept saying how cold I was because they all cried when they read it. I knew they were being manipulative. I wasn't going to cry just to make them happy. This was the man who abused me as a child. Exactly. In the obituary, my dad even insulted his younger sister, a woman who he had not seen in maybe 35 years. He also stipulated in advance that people couldn't leave online comments or responses to his obituary. If they wanted to write anything, they had to send it to my parents' church. Yes, the narcissist wants to control everything even when they are dead. And I've done videos on this. If the narcissist could be at their own funeral, they would. If the narcissist could fake their own death just to absorb the mourning, the wake, the funeral, they would. If the narcissist could fake their own, because this is what they want. So this is the next best thing, I guess. If he knows he's dying and he can plan it all out, it's just as good as being there then for him. But there's nothing to cry over. And that's what you realize. Like, what do I have to... I'm not having nothing to... I'm reading this bullshit and you want me to cry over it? The fuck out of here. Tell your story walking. Well, not in his case, obviously, but you know what I mean. Yes, the narcissist wants to control everything even when they are dead. Could it be that he was afraid of what his victims would say about him after his death? Just saying. This short visit was the last time I saw my father in person before he died. You know, my father was given the great gift of knowing he was dying. But did he take that opportunity to say sorry for all his abuse? No, he's a coward. Not only was I sexually abused by my father, I endured physical, verbal, and emotional abuse from both my mother and father all my life. So what was there to cry over? Maybe if he apologized, maybe then that would have been worthy of some tears. They really are sick sociopaths right into the ground. Right into the ground, man. Really, I should have never talked to them again years ago. In fact, after I got married, a few months later, I became pregnant. My husband helped write a letter to my parents. I told them to stay away from us. I was sick of their abuse, and I was scared about them being around my children. Well, unfortunately, I made the stupid mistake of letting them stay in our lives. I was worried about them coming after us for grandparents' rights, which don't exist in this country. Especially at the time where you were worried about it. They really didn't fucking exist. Well, unfortunately, I made the stupid... wait, hold on. So we kept a limited contact with them. Visits with our children were limited. My parents were not attentive parents at all. They didn't even notice I had hearing trouble until I was 4 years old. What kind of parents don't notice a child can't hear for 4 years? Unbelievable. Well, I had surgery to fix my hearing. I did, however, have to take speech therapy classes for a few years because of that. So they didn't realize you couldn't hear until you were 4 and it was so bad that your speech wasn't right. That's because your father was sexually abusing you and didn't want to take you to a doctor. They probably liked the fact that you couldn't speak correctly. Until it became noticeable around 4 when you're supposed to be going to preschool and start prepping for kindergarten. That's why they would act like they didn't notice for 4 years. Then many years later, my mother told me how their insurance didn't cover my ear surgery because the insurance didn't kick in until a day after my surgery. Well, Mom, why would you tell me this? How is your stupid mistake in handling medical insurance the fault of a 4-year-old child? It's not. But then again, they make you responsible as a child for things that you shouldn't even be responsible for. This is how they throw you into instability. My mother was always a very emotional, unstable woman. Yeah, she's a borderline. And borderlines love telling you shit like that. Borderlines love making you think shit's your fault as a child, that they didn't have medical insurance, and that's your fault. I'm sure she cried over that, right? One time when I was a kid, my mother was baking chocolate chip cookies. I said, "Oh boy, can I have one?" She said, "No, you need to go to bed. In the morning you can have one." Then my mother stayed up all night baking. When I got up in the morning, my mother was sitting in the kitchen crying. I said, "Why are you crying?" "Because I'm a borderline histrionic bitch." She said, "I made over 100 cookies and I ate them last night." Oh, you cunt. You fat cunt. Not only did I not get a cookie, I had to comfort this crazy bitch like I was her mother. Borderline, histrionic slag. My parents always had me clean everything in the house twice. I would have to vacuum twice. If I had to scrub the floors, I had to do it on my hands and knees. No mop was acceptable. Then I would have to wash it a second time, even though it was already clean. One time, as I was vacuuming the basement stairs, my dad left an open can of soda on the stairs. I accidentally knocked it over. Well, my dad hit me very hard for that, even though it wasn't my fault. I don't know why he didn't cry when he wrote his I don't know why he didn't cry over his obituary here. I can't figure this out. If I ever questioned them about doing my cleaning chores twice, I was hit hard for that. Sometimes a smack across the face, sometimes a wooden stick was used on me. One night in the early morning hours, I was kept up late to do dishes. My mother was standing over me, screaming in my face about how I was washing the glass bowl. The bowl slipped and I cut my hand quite bad. I had to go to the emergency room to get stitches. In the emergency room, they asked my mom, "Why was your daughter up so late doing dishes?" She squirmed her way out of it by saying I was being difficult. They were controlling with food too. They would make me eat food I hated, like sauerkraut. I couldn't even leave the table unless I finished it. They never wanted me to get dessert. If we went out to eat, I could never get dessert. They always had it though. At home, I would ask for a piece of Swiss roll cake in the freezer. It was always no. That's your dad's. But there are 3 Swiss cake rolls in the freezer. Still, the answer was no. Keep in mind, as a child, I was skin and bones. So why are they trying to keep dessert for themselves? Because the borderline and the narcissist control you through food. That's why I have problems with food to this day. I'm either skin and bones or I'm way overweight. Because they used to withhold food from me and then call me a glutton at the same time. There were chips that my mother can have. They were from my mother. This was from my father. This was special. None of it is for you. None of it. My brother got fried chicken and tater tots every day in the fucking Fry Daddy. Talked about that. Had to go to high school smelling like a fucking chicken McNugget. Because Fat Boy's diet consisted of fucking chicken wings, tots, and yogurt for 6 years. And TV dinners. I went into high school at 85 pounds. Fast forward to now, my father dying. He was staying in a nursing facility because both his legs were being amputated from the diabetes. Can't understand how he got Geez, Swiss roll cakes, he's eating them all the desserts. Don't know why they had to cut his feet and legs off and hands. Don't know where the fucking diabetes comes from. This is when the narcissism catches up to them. That's karma. Want to know why he didn't cry as he's getting his legs lopped off and his arms and his hands lopped off and he's trying to write, well, somebody's writing for him, his own obituary? Because he did it all to himself. And you realize he deserved it. You deserved it. You are now reaping the consequences of your own fucking disorder. You and your wife. And you want me to mourn? Fuck you. I laugh in your face. His condition was worsening. I could tell from phone calls with my father that he was starting to lose it. He was getting weaker and more forgetful. This was a person who was going to die soon. He told my mother and sister, "I don't want to die here. I want to go home." So my golden child sister arranged to bring my dad home. They called it breaking him out of the nursing home. We knew that my mom and sister were not able to serve as caregivers for a double amputee. So we seriously questioned their actions. A few days later, after my dad took a serious fall, so much for taking care of him at home, we all knew he would die soon. My mother said everyone needs to say their goodbyes now. I want it to be just me and your dad at the end. Let us go through the dying process alone. Then several nights later, I get a call from my mother. I thought maybe my father had died, but no, she was calling me because she wanted me to hear my dad screaming in agony as he lay dying. Oh, why couldn't I get it? Why couldn't I get a screaming in agony call? Please, please, does that hurt? Good, good. I hope it hurts, motherfucker. I hope it hurts. Good, good. Put the phone closer. I really want to hear the terror in his voice. That's how I would have looked at it, and I hope that's how you looked at it. I hope it hurts. I hope it, those Swiss cheesecakes that you ate all to yourself. Can't figure out why they had to cut your shit off because of diabetes. Hope it hurts, motherfucker. Hope it hurts. It was obvious that my mother intended to punish me by making me listen to his death throes. However, what she failed to consider is that this call also clearly demonstrated that he wasn't being taken care of properly. Good. Does he deserve to be taken care of properly? No. What she didn't consider is deep down in your subconscious, you liked it. And it was righteous because he was getting everything deserved. He chose to stay with that fucking borderline bitch, didn't he? So he should die at her hands, shouldn't he? Yeah, he should. Got everything he had coming to him. Hospice had given her the morphine he needed to be comfortable. 90 minutes after this traumatizing phone call, I get a phone call from my golden child sister telling me our father had died. Yay! 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 Good, glad he suffered to the end. Glad he suffered right till the end because that's what he deserved. I can only hope that's how my mother went out. My mother only called my sister to tell her the news. She did not bother to call me until many hours later after she had spoken with all the other family members, friends, and the funeral home. It was obvious she called me last because she wanted to keep haunting me with the guilt from the earlier call. You looked at that call all wrong because you didn't understand really where you were at. There's a reason why you didn't cry, because he wasn't worthy of your tears. Dad's funeral was about a week later. My husband and I flew in on the overnight red-eye flight from the West Coast. Then, from the airport, we drove about 3.5 hours to the church for the funeral. My mother made a point of insisting that I was there on time, so we arrived at the church a few minutes early. My mother and golden child sister were late in arriving, caused the mourners to keep asking us about my mother and sister. My husband and I were forced to greet everyone alone. Everyone kept asking, "Where's your mom and sister?" My mother showed up 30 minutes late. Can you believe that she was late to her own husband's funeral? Yeah, because now it's about her. Yeah, now it's about her. It was unreal. When she arrived, she started barking orders at us about where to stand. Then she pointed to my father in the casket and told me to kiss your daddy. Go on, kiss your daddy. I said no. First of all, I never called him daddy. That is a loving term for a father. I never referred to that sicko man as daddy. I was horrified when I noticed that flowers from my sister and I said daddy on the banner. I never wanted that. My sister had instructed the florist to put up that term on the flowers. It should have said father, not daddy. I know this might sound like a small thing to some people, but to me as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, it was a big deal. My sister had still not showed up to her father's funeral. Her coworkers and friends kept asking about her, and finally, after 45 minutes, my sister finally arrived. My mother never said a word to her, the golden child, for being late. She also wasn't made to stand in line with the other family members. She just waltzed in like she was the star, moving up and down the line of mourners, shaking their hands and smiling, acting like, "I'm here now, so the show can begin," while she greeted the line of assembled mourners. It's strange to greet people you don't know. It's amazing that such horrible people can even get all these mourners to show up. I was shocked at Virginia's funeral. Shocked. It's sympathy, because it's sympathy for the devil. And most of them don't even realize it. When people start telling you these stories about these narcs, about the kindness that they never showed you, it's like, wow. Wow, you evil bitch. You evil fuck. So you're capable of it, you're just not with me. Cool. People who were there to see mother and sister say sorry for your loss. In the meantime, neither my husband and I were in the slightest way emotional, not able to cry or feel anything at all because we were so numb due to the recent events and the way I had been treated through the entire life process. In fact, it was strange. For the first time in my life, I recognized that I felt absolutely no love or compassion of any kind from my family. Well, it's about time you realized it. Should have realized it when your father was reading you the obituary and you just stood there. Like, who gives a fuck? Thinking about it after so many years of abuse from all of them, I just had enough. By the way, watching your channel probably helped give me the strength to understand how I really felt. This was the moment that I knew I had to go no contact with these awful people. That phone call from my mother and father 90 minutes before he died was so traumatizing and horrific. I mean, it was pure evil about how all that was handled by my mother, along with her not calling me herself until hours after my father's death, me continuing to be treated as the family scapegoat. Right, but you shouldn't give a fuck, because the joke's on them. You didn't give a fuck about his death. You're unemotional, you couldn't cry, you didn't want to cry, because you hated him, because he was a sexually abusive pervert married to a borderline histrionic sociopath. Your mother wants to trying to keep that guilt on you past his death so the truth never came out. What she didn't bank on by that screaming phone call is that you should be looking at that now like, good, I'm glad he suffered to the end. Because why did he suffer? Why did he have diabetes? Well, smuggling desserts and keeping all the desserts for yourself and doing things, even though your mother's the one who ate 100 fucking chocolate chip fucking cookies in a night, I'm sure it's a pattern of behavior of both of them. His own narcissistic tactics is what fucking killed him. It's why he was screaming and didn't even realize it. You should have been sitting back laughing. Ha ha. I hope it hurts, motherfucker. I hope it hurts. I hope it was worth the cookies and the cheesecakes and the desserts you never let me fucking have. That's why they had to cut off your fucking feet and your legs. That's why you're writhing in pain with this sociopathic narcissist who just wants to rub it in my face and could give a fuck about your own pain. You did it to yourself. And you were supposed to mourn? Come on. Here's another example of the shenanigans that was associated with my father's funeral. My mother told us in advance that my husband would be required to prepare and read a eulogy at the funeral. When we arrived, my mother changed her mind. She said there was only time for one person to read the eulogy. So surprised, my younger sister, the golden child, was chosen to give the eulogy. Notice it wasn't me as the oldest daughter. Ah, the life of the scapegoat. I didn't want to get up and speak anyway, but you see my point about the pattern of behavior here. After the funeral service, lunch was served in the church. My mother got up and told everyone how her husband always ate dessert first. Right! That's why he fucking died of diabetes with no goddamn legs, moron! No shit! How when he was in the service, he would get called out. He would get back and all the dessert was gone. Oh, I'm so glad he died screaming in pain then. I'm so glad! So he learned to eat desserts first in order to get any. So in his honor, she requested everyone eat their dessert first. Hey, diabetes for everybody. Everybody get your fucking legs cut off. Awesome. Awesome. They're having a sale down on wheelchairs. Down at the wheelchair store, whatever the fuck you call that. Okay, we'll all become wheelies. Idiot. What an ego this woman has. I remember thinking, first of all, it was always you always wanted to deny me dessert, and second, he died in a diabetic with both legs amputated. Thank God you finally realized that. Thank God. Maybe eating the dessert first wasn't the best advice. Yes. Then my mother bullied my husband to get up and say a few things about my father. Of course, I wasn't asked to speak, nor was I interested. My husband wasn't too happy either about having to try to say something nice about my abusive father, so we shouldn't even have done it. We just wanted to get this whole charade of a funeral over and move on. After the meal, everyone was told to go ahead and take one of my father's neckties to remember him by. My father had a huge tie in the collection, and they were spread out on a table for someone to select one. Neither my husband or I bothered to pick up a necktie. We really didn't care to participate. Oh, that's awesome. That's what you want. You want the sweaty fucking necktie of a diabetic who eats his dessert first and had to have his legs cut off. Whoa, those things must smell fucking lovely. Wow. What, his fucking nut rag wasn't available? Shit, man. How disgusting. How fucking disgusting. We then went outside for a 21-gun salute by local military representatives since he served as a young man. After all, my parents loved a big look-at-me production in front of the crowd. After the funeral, we went to my mother's apartment where she proceeded to put a DVD recording of my father. She paid for this at the funeral home. It featured video footage taken before he died where he said, "Oh, I love my daughters even though I never saw one," referring to me that much. At that moment, my mother pointed at the screen and said accusingly, See what you did? My mother knows damn well my father sexually abused me, so that's why they never saw me much, and I wasn't happy about visiting them. Then my golden child sister said I needed to fill paper bags full of candy. My mother and sister wanted to take small bags of candy to the people of my father's dialysis group. What is wrong with these people? They're horrible. They're fucking sociopaths. Again, most of these people were diabetic. Yeah, no shit. We just had a funeral and I flew all night to get there. This is what you think is a priority? You have to be kidding. So my aunt and her family, along with my husband and I, filled bags of candy for the dialysis people. Oh, God, you shouldn't have. You should have just left. My mother and sister didn't lift a finger. They just sat there and watched us do the bags. What a surreal scene this was. After flying across the country and being treated in this manner on the day of Father's funeral, you can't make this stuff up. Finally, in their last-ditch effort to control, they said I needed to stay and play board games with them. Really? It's been a long day and you want to stay up late for fun and games. The next morning, we followed my father's hearse for 2.5 hours to the mausoleum across the state to reach a Fandy indoor mausoleum. During the long ride across state with the hearse, my sister called us to say, Mom wants you to write a note to put on Daddy's coffin. Again, with the daddy from her. Neither of us referred to him as Daddy when he was alive. I think I am going to puke. I was so tempted to write my real feelings about him and the abuse I suffered at his hand. My husband was even trying to encourage me to get stuff off my chest. You should have done it. Your husband's right. And honestly, her husband seems like he's a really good guy because I've already communicated with him. So you got a really good husband. Instead, I chickened out and just wrote something like, enjoy your new home in hell. Just kidding, Holly. Mom and Dad's mausoleum was picked out and paid for years ago with a lawsuit settlement they received, one of many over the years, and has their picture etched on the marble. They also had my name and sister's name etched on this big marble marker. Let me tell you, it's creepy to see your name on a big tombstone. My parents had to have an over-the-top burial arrangement above ground so the bugs and worms could not get them. With their pictures and family names all over it. Even in death, they want to stand out. Kind of creepy, huh? When we got to the mausoleum, they briefly opened up my father's casket one last time and we put our notes inside. Then my mother said how much my father loved her hair. She then proceeded to cover his whole face with all of her hair. She was practically on top of the coffin. Very weird and disturbing. You should have shoved her in. Okay, everybody go. Watching made us feel very uncomfortable. I told you this was the weirdest funeral I ever experienced. My sister said, "Daddy needs his hairbrush and comb," as she placed it in one of his trouser pockets. She then reached up close to the coffin lid as to say, "Okay, I'm done here." When the funeral home lady saw my sister trying to close the coffin, she panicked and rushed in to stop my sister from closing the lid. "Stop, you're going to break the lid," said the lady. "I'll take care of closing it for you." While all this was going on, I looked in astonishment. My husband was trying to hold back his laughter. It was like we were watching a bad sitcom. Pictures were taken with relatives at the mausoleum, and in each one, my sister was smiling with a huge grin quite inappropriately. My husband says she acts like she has a drug problem, behaving odd and hyper, and not able to display proper emotions given the setting. My mother never seems to notice these odd behaviors, probably because she's deemed as the golden child. Afterwards, we all went to eat at a burger place. I paid for all the food for my family, the priest, and the funeral home people. I only tell you this so you will know that my mother expects me to pay for everything when we do visit them. During the lunch, a little drama scene unfolded about payment for funeral and flower arrangements. There's always something. It was difficult getting away from these people. My mother and sister tried to shame me into staying for 2 weeks. There was nothing for me to do there. We had to be steadfast in order to say, "We're leaving now." On my way home, I had a major emotional breakdown. It was the first time I cried on this whole trip, and it wasn't from my dad dying. I was upset from having to deal with my mother and sister. I realized I feel no love for them anymore. I said to my husband, "I have no reason to come back here again, even if someone passes away." I'm glad you realized that. When I returned home, I continued to email pictures of my children and grandson to my mom and sister. I thought the pictures would help cheer them up, but my mom and sister became upset with all the pictures and videos I sent because they too were busy dealing with their own situations. They said they didn't like all the email interruptions and disturbances. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. I made the tough decision to cut off contact with my mother and sister. We changed our home phone number. Emails from my mother and sister are automatically deleted. I have no interest in communicating with them at all. They are out of the lives of my family. My sister wrote emails that said, "You're evil, you're horrible, I love you." Then my mother and sister sent harassing emails to my adult children. Our children are aware of the situation and they support my decision to go no contact completely. My husband and I are happier with no more dark clouds around us. My family never added anything positive to our lives, which is why you never cried. You cried over the life you could have had. You cried over the years and time you wasted on them that day. You cried because you realized there was no reason to take it anymore. And sure as shit wasn't over your father. They were only users and looters no matter what we do for them. It will never be enough to make them happy. My view is they live to hurt people and make everyone miserable around them. So other relevant point about my sister becoming so viable that it's very painful to me. One other relevant point about my sister becoming so vile that it is very painful to me. Back when I was graduating from high school and about to move out of the house, I went out of my way to tell my sister about my dad's abuse. I wanted her to know about him, to protect her from harm after I was gone. My mother also knew about my father, so she was in denial and enabling his behaviors. It hurts that after his death, they both would rather protect his memory with a big lie, denying his behaviors and abuse, than to be supportive of me. Ollie, narcissists do seem to get worse with age. I wished I walked away years ago. What's important is that I am no contact now. I still deal with triggers and nightmares sometimes. It hurts to know you were never loved. on my birthday message last year, my mom said in a voicemail, "I haven't always liked you, but I always loved you." Ugh. Yeah, well, I never liked you or loved you. How about that? Oh, who doesn't get love for that birthday message? By the way, as you know, the contents of the letter are just the tip of the iceberg. All of us scapegoats have so many stories. We don't know where to start. Thank you for taking the time to read my letter, Ollie. I really appreciate any comments and thoughts you have. Sincere thanks to you and for all that you do to the community of survivors. Your sense of humor and understanding of reality of these god-awful situations means so much to us. Sincerely, Anonymous. And thank you, Anonymous, for writing in. And thank you for your very generous donation. So I really do appreciate it. Look, this is very well written, and it's a very good story. But what you have to what you realized is the narcissist didn't deserve your tears. And the narcissist died exactly how he deserved to die. In your case, and this is what you should really take heart in, and at this point, it should really give you a good feeling to know all of your father's and mother's fucking tactics of their hoarding and their food hoarding and all the shit they did to you is what killed him and is what made him suffer to the end. And is why when he read that obituary, you didn't give a fuck. And once it was all over, you realized, I have nothing with these people. These people are nothing. So I hope that helps. Thank you so much for your contribution and story. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been The Narcissistic Resistance.